this is the sort of last shifting date where we couldn't get the room for the last week, the last Tuesday of the month. But from here on out, it's going to be last Tuesday every month, 6 o'clock. Seems to be going well. So next month, Suzette is going to give us a talk about the women's vote in 1914. All right, I will introduce the speaker. Mike Steinberg has 30-plus years experience in filmmaking as a producer, writer-director, cinematographer, and editor. He has worked with numerous film festivals as a programmer and consultant. His own films, which he makes with his full-time creative partner and wife, Kelly Boma, have earned placement in national film festivals, including AFI Discovery's Silver Docs, now AFI Docs, the Independent Film Festival, Golden Sun Short Film Festival on the island of Malta, the Canadian International Short Film Festival, Portland International Film Festival, Hardacre Film Festival, Big Sky Documentary Film Festival, Big Muddy Film Festival, and St. Louis International. Louis. Steinberg has taught at the University of Montana, Webster University, and the College of Languages in Lodz, Poland. He lives in Missoula, Montana, where he is the executive director of the Roxy Theater, a nonprofit community cinema.
Yeah. Oh, you like that? Sounds like a nice guy. I don't know. I love that she says St. Louis. I mean, I'll just call you out on it because I wish we would have called it St. Louis like other people do, and the song calls it St. Louis. But
it's because of the song, because I used to watch the movie a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
So it's just Meet Me in St. Louis. Yeah.
I just wish, I mean, because people have said that. You're not alone. People are like, oh, yeah, aren't you from St. Louis? And I just grin a little bit. I'm like, yes, that's where I'm from. I wish I was, but I'm from St. Louis. Good evening. Thanks for coming out. I'm really delighted that I was invited to be here to present the history of the Roxy Theater. The history of the Roxy is also kind of a little bit of the history of Missoula. So if you've been around here, some things will be familiar, maybe some names will be familiar. But the bigger picture is kind of a history of cinemas in the United States and the way the presence of a community space like a movie theater has changed over, in this case, nearly 90 years. I'll also let you know that even though I do know quite a bit about the Roxy, I'm not like a dyed-in-the-wool history person in the sense that, oh, I'm going to get all these dates wrong, and I apologize up front when I confuse the decades or even the centuries, because I'm out of touch with time completely, so it won't be that bad. But nonetheless, I can't, you'll see, there are a couple dates in here. I'll get some movie dates right, I'm sure. But I'm feeling a little self-conscious in that this is a History Buffs event, and I don't know how deep you go into that kind of thing. But anyway, let's get started, shall we? So this is the beautiful Roxy Theater, located right on the Hip Strip, the South Business District, as it was once known, here in Missoula, Montana, on Higgins Avenue. Anyone been to the Roxy? Yay! Boy, what a drag this would be if you would be like, never. The building was built in 1937, which we'll get to in a second, but here is kind of the modern version of the Roxy Theater. We have a year-round film series, I guess you'd call it, of first-run movies, new release films, and classic titles that all sort of lands under the umbrella of Roxy. We have a renowned film festival, the International Wildlife Film Festival, which has been going on since 1977. Camp Horror is our newest little film festival. It started 3 years ago. We just did one, and it's sort of like horror film festival, but it's very campy, hence the combination of words there. They show strange movies like Friday the 13th and, campy horror stuff. And they have a live presence of, it's very meta. There's like, people are introducing the film, they're dressed like camp counselors. There's a serial killer, the sack lunch killer that runs through the theater. It's a really fun, crazy weekend. Also, I forgot, we have another festival called Queer West, which is the logo should be up here. It's the only LGBTQ plus film festival in the state of Montana. We also have the Montana Film Fest, which is coming up in 2 weeks. Oh my goodness. Yes, October 3rd through the 6th at the Roxy. And it's independent films, mainly from the United States, but there's some international titles. We have something like, we have 10 different features and a bunch of filmmakers coming in from all over the place. The Roxy Film Academy is our kind of after school and summer program for kids. This year, we had a record number of kids sign up and a whole new program of high school kids. And this, our newest program, the Roxy Film School, which we just started, as a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago. It's not an accredited film school, mind you, but it's a Monday night meeting, month-long program of sort of adult education in film. So we started with a kind of broad, what is a movie? And we're looking at kind of cinematography and sound and editing and all sorts of fun stuff like that. The next class will be a month long in November, and then we're doing a couple in the spring as well. We're not certain what the next one is. It's either going to be a class on the musical, so 4 weeks of the musical, or maybe film noir, which is so fun to talk about. Okay. The Roxy is a nonprofit. Not our business model, mind you, but we are a nonprofit. Our mission is to make the world better through the power of cinema, education, and community. And so all of those different logos and banners you saw are, again, the sort of modern incarnation of our theater and what we feel is it's best used for. But going way back in time, 87 years ago nearly, the Roxy was built in 1924. When the theater was opened officially on September 24th, the entire neighborhood, again, as I said, called the South Side Business District, took out ads welcoming the Roxy to the neighborhood. Here's an example of that, where you can see the first film that they showed publicly was this movie, Three Smart Girls. It's lost to history, and nobody knows that. Deanna Durbin, you know, that old household name. But you can see like examples of the electrical shop and Interstate Lumber all welcoming the Roxy. My sense is these are the people who built the theater, right? And they got ads in the paper, but it does read very much like community from the start. The original owner was Oscar C. Paisley, the Paisley family they were. There's again a close-up of that ad for Three Smart Girls. We discovered, this made us all very happy, honestly, when we found this out. We discovered that even though there was this public announcement of the first screening, there was a soft opening the night before. Arizona Days, a Tex Ritter Western, which we showed to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Roxy. And I'll just tell you, for lack of any real entertainment value, we'll probably not be showing that ever again. It's a pretty boring, except for the couple of songs that Tex sings, it's pretty boring. I mean, it's just like random horses on a back lot. It's really not that exciting. But nonetheless, it's a lot cooler than Three Smart Girls, so that is the actual first movie that was screened at the Roxy. Here's a very early picture. I'm guessing from, let's say, 1943, 44. Springtime in the Rockies is up there on the marquee, starring Betty Grable. As you can see, there was also, this was the sort of Five and Dime next door. I don't know if you can see it in this picture. No, you can't quite, but you'll see it in another one. On the other side was a barbershop, the Roxy Barbershop. And I don't know if you've kept up with the history of Higgins, but not long ago, there was also Compass Barbershop, which moved in. They moved in about 7 years ago, outgrew the space, and they're now down on the corner. So it was nice. We were thrilled to welcome the barber. There's something maybe that goes hand in hand, getting a haircut and watching a movie, I guess, because I feel like I've seen many, many historic photos of barbershops right next to I guess we just had time to do things like that, go to the movies. So this is looking north down Higgins. You can see, maybe can you read that where it says Safeway? That's the Missoula Senior Center, but that's the Safeway building that it once was. This, I think, is a gas station on this corner. This would be 6th and Higgins. And you can see the Roxy sort of in the distance there. It says Kirk Douglas, so I'm guessing this photo is from the early 50s, maybe mid-50s. That's about the time that Douglas emerged as a name you'd put on a marquee, for example. 1952, the Ten Commandments right here with the beautiful vehicle. I'm sure maybe someone in the audience knows what sort of vehicle that is. Come on, what is it? Clock's ticking. It looks like an Edsel. Okay, we'll buy it. It's an Edsel. Clearly a 51 Edsel, brand spanking new. And yeah, you can't quite see, but the barbershop is still the awning there, which I don't know if the current owners of the Humble building, which is the building right next door to the Roxy, I don't know if they looked at historic photos or they just got lucky, but those are the same awnings that have been reinstalled right there on the Humble building. Yeah?
Tickets for those early shows. 10 cents.
Well, they had 10 cents and 25.
Yeah, so we're getting progressively more. It's a bit more than 25 at this time, but I'm guessing in 1952 tickets were probably about 50 cents. Here's one more shot. That's a really great picture of the Five and Dime next door. Dr. Zhivago, which is early 60s, maybe 61, something like that. So let me give you a little bit of a background on the theater now that you've seen it. So when the theater was originally open, as I told you, it was the Paisley family who had the theater built and operated it. It existed as a first run in the very beginning, and it could not quite compete with the downtown theaters. Very shortly after it opened, within 2 years, the owners of the Wilma, Edna Wilma at the time, purchased the Roxy, and it became a second-run theater for the downtown screenings. So just so you know, just a little bit of detail on how that works. Some of you might remember. The movie theaters, of course, the only option for seeing movies at the time, the movie theaters had kind of concentric circles where they moved, in bigger cities, it was literally that, where there was like a ring, a center ring where the movies were, the first run movies were, and then they would move out to the suburban areas in the smaller theaters. And a film had to sort of stick around, probably contractually for a minimum of 4 weeks, even if it was bombing. And then it could move on to what was called second run, and that the tickets were cheaper. The theaters would get the same print that was in town. It would just literally be trucked over so they could play it. And then there were even cheaper shows, tertiary runs, where the theater would go off to the third run, or a bargain run. I'm sorry, not the theater, but the film print would. The result, of course, would be eventually the film prints would just get shredded, the longer they were played over and over, something like 4 or 5 times a day in some theaters. That would just be open for a matinee and then play on into the evening. This was a really good system for the Wilma owners because they could have a film downtown, charge quite a bit, charge probably more like 75 cents down there, move it over to the Roxy, and for a reduced rate, they could keep it going. And it was also a good deal for the neighborhood. The University District, even back then, college students looking for a bargain and not being able to afford maybe a first-run movie downtown, so waiting a few weeks till it ended up at the second run. This is a gentleman named Ed Sharp. Ed is legendary. He, after Edna Wilma passed, he inherited the Wilma and ran the Wilma, the Roxy, and the Go West Drive-In, which was out near the Y, for many years, for 40 years. This is Ed, with his beloved pigeon, Karahoto. Karahoto would often sit on Ed's shoulder and, let's just say, deposit quite a bit of crap. Literally, often Ed would turn around to get the popcorn for you, and his back would just have poop on it. In the basement of the Wilma Theater, there was this extraordinary space that Ed developed called the Chapel of the Dove. And it was a shrine to movies. You can see remnants of it around town. For instance, the altar that was at the center, well, really, arguably, the movie screen was the altar at the center, but there was the actual altar that had come out of a church. That's on display at Rock and Rudy's over on Blaine Street, their main building. There were also 2 life-size images on either side of Marilyn Monroe and Humphrey Bogart that flanked the screen. Throughout the theater space, there were grottos, many of which were honoring pigeons that he had loved. And eventually Karahoto was stuffed and part of that display as well. This is Missoula, you guys. This is the Roxy in the 70s. You know, the theater became something of a, you know, it fell into ill repair in the 1970s. They also started screening whatever they could. Pornographic films were popular at the Roxy. You know, all of the favorites of the day, Deep Throat, you know, The Devil and Miss Jones, Behind the Green Door, all those titles, and many, many, many more. This is, I think, a wonderful photo, though. This is a film that, in a sense, was sort of a crossover film into the, and that the pornographic industry capitalized on. So this is Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris, starring Marlon Brando, as you can read. I apparently can't. It's very much an art film. It's a, you know, it's an Italian film technically, but with some American actors, and was heavily lauded by critics. And in fact, I don't have the actual date on it, but Academy Award nominated. So it's a great film, and you can see the people are lined up to see it. And one of the reasons it was booked in the Roxy in the first place is because it was rated X, right? It was this, along with Midnight Cowboy a few years before that, 1969 was when Midnight Cowboy was released. It was also won Best Picture. It's the only film to win Best Picture that had an X rating. The MPAA did not copyright the X rating, and so pornographers capitalized on that and started rating their movies X in a way to say, oh, if you like Midnight Cowboy, you'll really like this one. You know, this one's not only X, it's triple X. And since the Roxy was already doing that, it's you know, it's just natural that they would show this. This one is also mid-70s. No, it's the Turning Point, so it's probably like 75, something like that. The theater's looking kind of funky. I don't know about that particular paint job. It does show off the streamlined deco, I suppose, with those accents, but it's a little extreme. Oh yeah, exactly. So this is, if you go back and look at the history of the marquee itself, which we did because we did a big renovation, which I'll get to later. You can see this is the 50s version of it in the early 60s, and then by 73, that piece is just gone without any explanation. It's just not part of it. Maybe it failed and they took it down, or I don't know, maybe someone stole it, maybe someone hid it. The setback is barely there, incidentally. I mean, when we measured for our new marquee, we were right there. We had to get a variance to go as far out as, you know, we wanted to go, and then we decided to pull it back because it probably wouldn't be safe. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that's what happened. Like someone nicked it and it was partially destroyed, and so they took it down. But yeah, good eye. That sort of cascading neon piece is all gone. In the 1980s, the Roxy was really suffering. A combination of things. It became a dollar show. And this is my illustration of the combination of things. It really was all down to Mr. T, I think, really. No, but it was a time of home video. Cable television was a big competition. Movie theaters were beginning to suffer. And it also became the time of the multiplex and the great blockbuster. The Roxy was a 600-seat theater originally. And one picture is a real tough go for a movie theater, particularly in that era. One could argue in this era as well. But if you have a movie and it's not performing, and there's other options. In fact, there were lots of options in Missoula by this time. You know, many of the old theaters, the Wilma was still operating. The Crystal Theater was operating, also on Higgins, and showing mainly art films. But the Carmike had come in, and they bought what was this beautiful Art Deco theater right over on Orange and Higgins, called the, thank you, the Fox Theater. Beautiful Native American Art Deco design. It was so gorgeous. And they just shuttered it so that they wouldn't have competition for their then threeplex on Higgins, or on Brooks, and then eventually a sixplex, which came in. And then and then they had a 9, which became a 12. But so there was a lot of competition. And a single screen not performing meant kind of a disaster for the Roxy. The Roxy was famous, most famous in this era, for its sticky floors. So sad. In 1994, Ed Sharp passed away, and there's Carajoto sitting on Ed's head. Can you see that? That's a beautiful image. And that's the altar at the Chapel of the Dove. So when Ed died, he had promised, well, prior to his death, he promised the Roxy to one of his lovers. But as it turns out, his will gave it to another lover. So that lover was not too happy, as you can imagine, the one that didn't get the Roxy. And so the result was this. Yeah. As you can see, too, it's a totally different marquee. So in some point from the 70s to this 1994, they had changed out that marquee for something different. What's that? Yeah, right. They painted it. There's like this stucco material or something, stone-like stucco material. This is Western lighting, by the way. That's in case anyone's curious about how the rest of the block had changed. But yeah, so there was a massive fire on February 19th, 1994. It blew the doors across Higgins Avenue. Yeah, absolutely crazy. Inside, no one was in the theater. They were showing the sequel to the Addams Family Value. You can't quite tell in the resolution from this image, but in this beautiful photo, this was featured in the Missoulian. You can see clearly that's what it is. We have never shown that film, nor will we ever show that film.
So that was gas explosion?
You know, it was this combination of, absolutely, it would have been a gas explosion, but it was also just the sheer intensity of all the soft goods in the building is what the inspectors had said. But it was never solved. It was an arson that was never solved. So the story I told you is lore, but it's held to be the story. And the aftermath was pretty severe. There was a great fight for the property. The business that was there really wanted it to be a parking lot. The community rallied together and really, insisted that they bring the movie back. I mean, the insurance paid for the rebuilding of it. And so by 1997, the Roxy was ready to go, and they reopened. This picture is so funny to me. This is actually 98. When I moved out here in 98 for good, had been back and forth for a few years. This is the only movie, 200 Cigarettes, the only movie that I saw in the rebuilt Roxy Theater, prior to what's to come. I didn't take the picture. I mean, that would make it explainable, but it's just odd to me that the archival photo that we had in the file, I happened to go that week when that movie was there. So the Roxy in 98 reopened as a dollar theater, which is not a very good sign. They had 3 screens, which was super smart. Whoever rebuilt it decided instead of one long rake of 600 seats and the screen at the end of the alley, at the alley wall, that they would rebuild it, fitting 3 screens into what was once one big theater. The smart thing, of course, was that they could juggle. In this case, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've got 6 movies playing, and they're making $1 on each of those tickets. So they've got options. Oh, I'm sorry, $2. They raised the price. That was inflation. It didn't last long as a dollar theater. In fact, shuttered in 1999. And at that point, we're going to go flashback a little bit to give you a little history. The International Wildlife Film Festival, which started in 1977. This is Dr. Chuck Jonkel, Dr. Charles Jonkel. He was a bear biologist at the University of Montana. And in 77, he organized the first International Wildlife Film Festival as a way to bring ethics to wildlife filmmaking. Chuck, great guy. He led these expeditions literally to the poles, not all the way to the poles, but up to the Arctic and glacier, and all around North America to see bears, to take people and educate them. And he was really, really interested in cinema and its ability to teach people about wild places and teach conservation. And he found what was happening in wildlife film to be really pretty deplorable. Namely, sort of the faking of animal behavior for, kind of the sensational effect of film. So taunting an animal to get a dramatic effect on camera, or or just telling an anthropomorphic story for the sake of the drama of it, as opposed to the real science and the real animal behavior that could be observed. So he founded the festival as a way to encourage that kind of filmmaking. And I'm happy to say, I mean, we are strongly in business as the Wildlife Film Fest, and those principles that were part of Chuck's original founding are very much alive. This is some images of, this is the first festival. That's the poster they did. Is that like Super Missoula or what? You just write the day, and they didn't know what the day was yet or what they wanted to say. So they're just like, oh, we'll leave this blank, and then we'll just, yeah. So this also is the Wild Walk Film Fest, which we do. That didn't start until the 90s, but I like it in here with these imagery. So around that time, in 1999, the Wildlife Film Fest, had been around. They never really had a home and a real theater. Started on campus, did some screenings at the Once Upon a Time Children's Theater, which was over here on Front Street. Screened films at the Wilma. They were all over the place. Had an office out in Fort Missoula, and this goal of buying the Roxy Theater to make it their home, was very ambitious, and a lot of support from the community made it possible. The festival continued. The Wild Walk, here's more images of the Wild Walk. Actually, I want to mention this room is named for one of our former board members, Cooper Birchinall, who is in fact incredibly instrumental on giving me a job. We'll get to that part in a minute, but this is, we show the films over at the university. We have these massive programs of matinees and show films in our theater. The festival itself annually brings in, over the lifetime, the 200,000 attendees, but each year is about 4,000 attendees. This is, just some numbers for you can see. On average, it's about 50 or 60 films that we present every year. And then as far as students are concerned, there you have it. 4,000 students every year come in and see films. We bring in filmmakers to talk to them. Since COVID, we've begun going out to schools where it's just easier for us to go to some places. The transportation, the time it takes to get kids on a bus and bring them from St. Ignatius to watch a movie and then take them back is just not conducive to their lifestyles. So we do it. In 2012, in 2012, before I had anything to do with the Wildlife Film Fest, the then director stepped down, and the board was kind of in a crisis. They didn't know what to do. At that time, in 2012, I was here in Missoula running the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival. I had just stepped down from that post as their director, and in March of 2013, just after, I guess, the festival, my friend Cooper reached out to me and said, hey, Mike, do you think you could help us with the Wildlife Film Fest this year? I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I could help. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. He's like, good. Come down to the Roxy. So I did, and it was Cooper, and it was another board member there, and they were like, we need you to put the fest on. I was like, what do you mean put on the whole fest? Like, you want me to make all the movies while I'm at it? Because no, but they didn't really have anything organized, and so it was about 4 weeks before the festival. And I was like, well, if I can get a hold of some of these people that I was working with at the Big Sky Film Fest, maybe. And in fact, we did somehow. We did, and there it was, the 2013 Film Festival. That's me in a wolf's head there, as you can see. Usually it's the other way around, where it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Here you have a sheep in wolf's clothing, I think, is what's shaken. But no, somehow magically we were able to pull off that event. And you know, I grew up in suburban St. Louis. The wildlife we had was like squirrels and possums, you know, raccoons occasionally. You know, and I'm not. That's not my thing. You know, I'm a filmmaker and have worked in festivals for years now. And even prior to working at Big Sky Film Fest, or coming around to the Wildlife Film Fest, I had been programming a college film series for about 8 years. And it was, or 10, I guess, at that point. It was, you know, bringing filmmakers to the university and hosting them and showing, you know, it was not wildlife stuff. And some of it was documentary, but it was not wildlife. So I loved the event, but what I loved even more was the possibility that the organization could do something with the Roxy. And it had really just been sitting there for, at that point, nearly over 10 years since they owned it. It had been what one board member called a really expensive office space. 3 theaters that sat mostly vacant, except for some workshops during the film festival, occasional rentals to organizations, but there was an unfortunate policy that they would not allow events at the Roxy that were not on mission. And the mission of the Roxy, or not even the Roxy, it was the Wildlife Film Fest. The mission at the time was to promote awareness of wildlife and habitat through film. So if that wasn't what you were doing, if, for example, you wanted to show a ski movie or have a film series of classic films or present a documentary about, you know, voters' rights, whatever, something, that just did not fit in the mission, and it didn't belong there, at least in the eyes of the previous director. I said, well, maybe we could do something more than that. Maybe we could just, you know, do more. And so the board said, sure, go ahead. So we did a very cheap renovation, which is to say we cleaned up the concession stand. The concession stand, by the way, contained expired candy. That'll just give you, that's all, I mean, I probably could have just said that, and that'll tell you the whole story you need to know, right? Like, it's a movie theater, and the candy's not being sold. No, but this is my good friend Chris Sand, who ended up working there for a couple of years. We did a cleanup and a paint job and redid the counter and kind of just, I guess I could say we kind of breathed life into the theater. And we started inviting people from the community, screening films every weekend. I had lots of contacts at distribution companies, and so I reached out and started to program movies. Here you can see early on some of our early fare, an avant-garde music film night, Twin Peaks, the TV show. We showed it every Monday night, 2 episodes, and served coffee and donuts. And then Zavalny. Oh, that's Nathan Zavalny, who teaches children guitar. So that must have been a Zavalny, I don't know why it says Zavalny. Maybe it was just Nathan. Maybe Nathan was just playing a little music concert. That kind of makes sense. So anything that would stick, that was it was like the spaghetti philosophy. We threw it against the wall, and if it stuck, we would do it. So it was classic films, foreign films, independent films, classic Hollywood films, and we started playing some new films. Eventually, we raised some money to buy this projector right here, which is a digital cinema projector. It's this, at the time, 2014, it was the state of the art. And somehow, that's Aaron Roos just rolling it in the back door, like you do. Somehow, the timing was just so that we were able to open, right after our projector was installed in February of that year, the movie that was nominated and eventually won Best Picture. And it hadn't played in Missoula at all. So it was like crazy. Everybody wanted to see it. Birdman, by the way, if you haven't seen it. And that just started us off on a whole path of art house cinema. So art house cinema is this idea. For us, it's about 70% of the films we play are independent cinema. We play a handful of foreign films, documentary, and we do repertory. These stats should change because this year has been a little bit different for us. We actually are leaning really heavily into repertory because that's what people seemingly want to see. And what do I mean by repertory? Classic films, Like right now, Amadeus is playing over at the Roxy. Blues Brothers was last week. Purple Rain's next week. There's a theme there. But they've been very successful to show old classic films. In addition to kind of bringing in new films and showing the foreign films, we decided it might be helpful for our audience to steer them in the direction of what we're doing. So give them some ideas monthly of what's going on. So we've developed all of these different programs. Sometimes it's a monthly series of, like for example, we showed 4 Bill Murray movies and we called it Murray Me. Or Carpenter things, where films by John Carpenter, like I think we showed Halloween and The Thing. Christine, I think, was also in there. We did a whole series one summer called Totally 80s Summer, just classic movies from the 80s. We have other installments of like each month presenting movies like indigenous cinema, films by Native American filmmakers. Movie Cult is just classic cult movies that we show on Saturday night. Out at the Roxy is our queer series. Cinema Abroad, classics of international cinema. Essential Cinema, just really good classic movies that everyone needs to see. This was one of my favorite things we ever did. TV night. We actually just showed old TV shows, and that was kind of fun. People like that. This Movie Mockers was one of my favorite things we ever did, but we don't do it anymore. I should take the slide off. We hired comedians to sit on the couch. We set up a couch on stage and make fun of the movie that you were watching. Not Casablanca or anything like that, but like, really terrible Invaders from Mars and that kind of thing. So I think, what we found ourselves doing is sort of leaning into great classic experiences in the movie theater that people want to have. And that can be, watching a film you've never seen, or watching a film you've seen 100 times, or revisiting in its entirety a series of films. E.T. is a great example of a movie because I'm 52 years old. I saw E.T. when I was like 11, and it blew me away. I actually got to see it the night before because when I was a kid, my dad owned a record store. Whenever there was a soundtrack to a movie, he got passes to see the movie in a special screening before. God knows why they don't do this anymore, but they don't. And I went to see E.T. I even got a button that said, I saw E.T. And I wore it the next day. And people were like, no, you didn't. And I was like, yes, I did. I saw E.T. last night. And like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. And I just thought it was awesome, right? In 1982, I thought it was just incredible because I just related to this kid and him. I think it's a him. Yeah, it must be him. Anyway, I just related. And then later in life, I watched the movie and I find out, oh, it's about divorce. The whole movie is just this heartbreaking, tragic film about divorce. And I still love it, So anyway, that's what the Roxy provides, is this ability to kind of go back in a different way when you go watch a classic film you've seen, or to experience something, for the first time. We also started this event called the Montana Film Fest. There's Aaron Roos and Andrew Rizzo, who founded the festival. We brought in filmmakers and critics. Here's the wonderful Kenneth Turan interviewing Lily Gladstone in her first big performance in Certain Women, which we premiered at the festival. We screened movies outside across the street. Princess Bride there for a big crowd. It's a great event. It happens every October. We end up bringing in, this year, again, about the same number, 10 features, 20 shorts, about 25 filmmakers, all kinds of fun to be had. I don't know if we could fit more people in that lobby. My goodness, that's amazing. Another outdoor screen. Oh, it's the same movie. Okay. And then we started this thing, the Roxy Film Academy, which teaches kids filmmaking. And through the first 10 years or so, we just found things to do, different stuff that could make the Roxy even better. We have an annual Kung Fu movie marathon, which is very popular. We start at noon and we're done, around midnight. I think it's supposed to, does it say noon? 12 to 12. I don't know, so if there's a gorilla there. We did some live plays, some music. People dressed like Sriracha. I don't know what those other people are doing, but that stuff happens. And we did have a children's film fest that started as Hootenanny, and we changed the name to Kid-O-Matic a few years ago. It's currently on hiatus, so don't have much to say about it. Children's programming is tough. It's really tough. The Wildlife Film Fest, just in this last year, 120 films, including short films. 8,000 attendees, happened over 9 days. And then in 2017, we embarked on something that became a new marquee. So we decided that this old marquee, which there it is. This is the former governor, Steve Bullock, now movie star Steve Bullock, came down and took a big selfie with the marquee, the old marquee. We didn't get him back for the new marquee. Maybe that'll happen someday. Anyway, we raised privately 50,000, another 150 from a CBDG, a block grant from the state, and we're able to have designed and install a beautiful marquee, period accurate marquee. So we went from this thing that looked to me like, I don't know, it could have been at a outpatient facility. The whole building was so sad and tan. We celebrated on the 80th anniversary of the theater that night, in fact. We watched a film from the same year, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And then we lit up our brand new beautiful marquee. So that was 2017. We also were able to raise money to install more comfortable seats. The theater had what it had, but it needed so much better. We had another fundraising mission to bring back 35 millimeter film to the theater. So we installed, because when the film fest, when the film fest moved in, they took out all the old 35 millimeter equipment. So it was almost 20 years of that all being gone. We reinstalled these beautiful simplex projectors. There's Cal. People think he's my son. He's not. He's one of our projectionists. And if you haven't been in a theater and watched a 35 millimeter print in a while, I highly, highly recommend it. It is such a cool experience to remember, to feel what cinema really is, what movies really are. Digital is great, and there's certainly no way we could do what we do at the theater, without the digital technology. But to see a film as it was, particularly if it was shot on 35 millimeter film, to see how it was intended, so much more warmth and resolution is just phenomenal. There you go. People really enjoying a movie in that theater where the film projector is installed. Okay, I'll wrap up this last part. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. It has to vent. The projectors are vented as well. The digital projectors are vented. But yeah, this is a xenon bulb, and there's a little fan in here, and it pulls some of the heat out. It would probably cook the film and the projectionist if we didn't do that.
How much of it do you have? You have 3 theaters. One of them digital and the other's cinema?
We have digital in all 3 of the theaters in the main house, and then we have one theater, Theater 3, with the 35 millimeter projectors. And there's 2 of them because the process is a changeover. So you get these reels, and they have about 24 minutes. You play, and then you see a little mark up at the top called a cigar burn, and you switch over to the next projector, and you do that back and forth, reel to reel. It's labor intensive. And there's a reason why we have a digital, cinema, primarily digital. So everybody having a great time, piling in, enjoying movies, and then just some recent history. This happened. I don't know if you remember that time. So, we were all clearly affected by the whole planet virtually shutting down. And our model in particular was greatly affected because we had spent at that point, about 8 years on my watch, 7 years on my watch, trying to just get people to get together, right? To remember the act of movie going and to be around one another. But there was nothing we could do. So we did what everybody else did. We got that little dog. We got that dog 5 days into the pandemic. and then we did a lot of yoga. I learned to bake. Pretty good. It's pretty good. That was pretty good bread. I haven't really baked much since. So yes, as you know, everything shut down. We had at the point that when the pandemic hit, we had about 24 people on payroll, and 9 of those people were full-time. The others were, ranging from three-quarter time, like festival people and front of the house staff. And we had to lay off almost everyone. We kept a core of about 6 people to get us through. The crazy thing is, just before, a few months before, we had signed a lease on the building next door so that we could build a new theater, the Annex Theater, we were going to call it. So we couldn't do much with that. It was going to be a 25-seat micro cinema. Even worse. Even worse than our 90-seat theater, right? So to get through the pandemic, we did quite a few things. I'll show you this one fun thing we did. We had this lease. We had to do something, so we kind of continued working. And we asked the building owners if we could take over this kind of space back here. I don't have a true before picture, but this had like all these volunteers and Ibervitas and just nonsense. This is the back of the Humble building, and that's the Roxy right there, side of the Roxy. So we said, could we do something with that space? Here's kind of a nice before and after. And they said, sure. So we put in these pavers set up a screen, that's me and Roos, and began showing movies out there with tremendous social distancing. We fit, I think, like 15 people on the back porch, Called it the Roxy Garden. And painted a marquee. I painted a mural. We went really overboard, as you can see. It's like, yes, it's not much. We're not making any money doing this. We're spending a lot. But it was something, it was a way we could gather. This is a eventual picture post-pandemic where people are obviously just hanging out there in a nice, I think that was 21, fall of 21. The theater itself, the little annex theater, did get built. It's a lovely little space. We utilized our old seats and built these risers. Again, seats 25. It's perfect for some documentary runs or small films, or sometimes films play at the main theater and find their way over there. To really get by during the pandemic, we eventually finished this thing in the fall of 2020 and started renting it out to people who could just hang out together. So bring your family and watch a movie together, or play video games. That was very popular. You don't see the screen in any of these pictures, but it's a screen this size, and they could hang out and fight each other on screen or whatever you do. The other thing we did was this, what we called Centerfield Cinema. This is a great overhead shot. As you can see, what you don't see is all the way in center field is a screen, which you can see nicely in that picture right there. The folks at the ballpark also couldn't get together, right, that summer. So we partnered with them, and we screened great big fun movies that everybody wanted to see. Jaws, Purple Rain, Goonies, just movies that are just fun family movies. We also played A League of Their Own, and I got to sit right here in the dugout to watch it. It was so awesome. It was the best. It was my favorite. The screen is at center field. The picture cuts it off, but it's like right there. So everybody's sort of oriented that way. It was super fun. I don't know if anybody was around for that, if you had a chance to do it. It really was. It kind of, it's what I did that summer. Every week, just went to the ballpark and watched a movie. And looked around, I was like, oh yeah, people, I forgot about you. What's that? The sound came through their system, and sometimes it wasn't great, and there was a delay, but there are speakers that are positioned, here in the, in the stands, and then they brought in, you can't see here, eventually they would drive, I don't think they did it yet, they would drive in a truck with speakers with a trailer and speakers that pointed out to the audience so they could hear. Because, yeah, the outfield, the field itself is not, there's no audio out there. It's not designed. People in the field don't need to hear the announcements so much. We also had a very socially distanced film festival that year. we went back and did some more screenings there. Eventually, the summer of 21, we reopened. And it took a little while, it took quite a while actually, to kind of get things going back on our feet. You know, people were a little leery, looking around at this crowd in particular. I'd say people in your age group were especially leery, like, why the hell am I going to go to the movies? It did take a little while, but people started coming around. Our film festival in the spring, the Wildlife Film Fest, really brought people's attention back to us. Great screenings there. And by the summer of 2022, so just a couple of years ago, or 23, sorry, we were back up to our numbers in payroll. This is our staff. These are, looking around, it's pretty great. Those are great folks. There's only 1, 2, 3 people who've moved on, but yeah, that's us. That's pretty cool. Love that. And here's sort of Roxy by the numbers real quick. So when we started in 2013, there was 1 year-round employee, and that was the executive director. So we got back around. I think we're closer to 26 now, but 24 by 23, we had 24 full-time employees. There were about 50 screenings in 2013, and that was just the film festival, basically. In 23, we screened 2,867 times. That's multiple. That's some films being screened multiple times, but that's the number of independent screenings. The revenue is a considerable leap. And I think we've added about, just because things are so damn expensive, we've added about 300,000 to that, and we're closer to 1.8 now in our annual budget. Audience size, just judging by the 2,500, you know, some of the numbers that suggest that's what it was for the film festival. Our annual audience is about 68,000 people who come through the turnstiles. We also started, which I didn't get into, a membership program, which did not exist, and now that number is closer to 2,000. And people, you know, pay as you go. You know, pay for a membership that gives you a discount, or you pay to see all the movies you want and all the organic popcorn you want to eat. This is the last slide I have here, and oh, that's, hey, what do you know? That's not terrible. This is a moment that happened. As you can see, it's our old marquee. It was probably 2014, maybe 2015, and I just happened up there. We were showing Hayao Miyazaki movie, you know, the Howl's Moving Castle, and these people aren't even at the movie. They were just gathered. I think it was just because the light was so beautiful. They were all gathered there, and just all contra dancing. It was 2015. I just noticed some of the titles that were up on the posters. Yeah, you get the idea. I don't know. I just think that's a great. This is a great moment that I'm so proud of, because, you know, that's what a theater is. It's a place where people gather. And if it's inside the theater or if it's outside the theater, it's the aura of the theater that brings them in. And yeah, I love that moment. Well, that is, yeah, there's my presentation. If you have any questions, I mean, I appreciate that you've asked questions along the way, but if you do have any questions, I'm more than willing to.
I have the mic, so maybe I can get Barbara to move it around as we have questions. But I had the great joy when I was a teenager working in the Orpheum and the drive-in in Plentywood, Montana from the age of 13 to 18. Yeah. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I think of it often, and that's what the Roxy offers when I do go there. Yeah, and thank you for saving it. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Also, a suggestion for a different film fest.
Yes.
Disney animated classics.
Boy, if I could only. We can't. There's a policy. Disney has a policy that. It's complicated. We've shown them outside, and that we can do as a nonprofit, but movie theaters can't book Disney classics in theaters. They're only available for community organizations. So, and there's some more complicated stuff that maybe I won't go into since. Of course, I'm on
Maybe
camera.
we'll talk. Maybe we can arrange something. Who knows?
Yeah, community organizations, any of you who are involved with community organizations, if you want to organize a classic Disney series, you can book those titles, but they just can't play publicly in a theater. Yeah, it's their policy.
Because I would like to see all of those one after another.
Yeah, me too.
Because it's been a long
Pinocchio.
time. Plus have organic popcorn.
Yeah.
Barbara, if anyone has
All
a
right.
question. Anyone else have a question?
Why is it called the Roxy?
Well, it's named after the Roxy in New York, which was very common that theaters would take that name. There were 3 other Roxys that the Paisleys owned initially: the Roxy in Forsyth, the Roxy in Hamilton, and the one here.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That Capsule in the Moon. I
Yeah.
forget what that was. Was it the first? Was it a French film or something?
Yeah, it's a film. Yeah, exactly. This is an image that's taken from A Trip to the Moon by Georges Méliès, and it's a moment in the film where the scientists are going to the moon. It's made in 1903, and the rocket is headed to the moon and then crashes into the moon's eye. And Méliès was a brilliant magician, and he found cinema. He went to that expo in 1894, I think it was, and saw the first cameras, and was so enamored. He's like, this is great. Like, he is a magician, so he liked the idea that you could stop the camera, take something away, start it up, and then it magically disappeared. But then he got hooked into storytelling. And so, yeah, Trip to the Moon is one of his most famous films. He did the same film multiple times, trip to different places, like A Trip to the Arctic, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so it's kind of funny. I mean, that was a film that was hugely inspirational to me as a young film student, because I just loved the idea of the magic of it, and it just kind of, not that I wanted to make films like it necessarily, but I was just really sentimental about it. And so when we were going to come up with a logo for the theater, I reached out to a friend of mine who was a designer, and I was like, could you just do something with the face of the moon from, we call him Moon Man around the office. But back then we didn't. I said, could you just do something? And he whipped this logo up and sent it to me. I was like, that's perfect. And we've never touched it since.
The new Willy Wonka film goes into the whole history of his movies.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I come to think of it, I knew that because my daughter saw it and told me that there was, Méliès stuff in it.
Did you say that Three Smart Girls is lost?
It's not technically lost. It's just no one knows that that is. I just meant in the sense that it's not a beloved classic or anything that we ever. Yeah. Because I'm not. If it's really lost, I'm not going to go look for it.
Because it was just surprising. I took that literally like, nobody's got a copy of this.
Oh yeah. No, I don't. I don't know for sure. I imagine it's a thing.
Because there was that documentary on saving Brenton.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, if that stuff's around, how does something from the 30s not around?
Yeah.
It's out there. On YouTube, possibly.
Yeah, I bet it is.
Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate you coming.
Well, thank you all.
Don't forget, next month, the last Tuesday, Suzette Dussault is going to talk about the women's vote. Thank you.